At my own daughter's funeral, I reached for the obituary program and my name wasn't there. Not once. Only her husband and their kids were listed, as if I had never existed. People whispered. Strange they left out her father. I swallowed the pain, pretending not to notice. That night, I found an envelope slipped into my hand. Inside was a letter from Marla herself, warning me don't trust Clayton. The farm holds what you were never supposed to see. They thought erasing me would silence me. But I had already decided I was going back to that farm. What I discovered there turned grief into a fight for truth. Follow my story until the end. Subscribe to the channel. And tell me the city you're watching from. I want to see how far my daughter's secret reaches. The church bells tolled low and heavy, each chime settling deeper into the chill of late autumn. A thin fog clung to the edges of the graveyard, blurring the rows of tombstones into one endless line of loss. People moved quietly through the crisp air, their coats pulled tight, heads bowed, whispers weaving through the silence. Inside the small-town church, the smell of lilies was overwhelming, almost suffocating. I sat near the front, watching faces I'd known for decades pass me by with polite nods but little warmth. My name was nowhere on the floral displays, no ribbon said from your father, no card marked with my hand. A strange omission, sharp as a nail under the skin. Conversations hushed when I walked by. Folks averted their eyes, as though grief had made me invisible. When the service began, Clayton stepped forward, his shoulders squared like he owned the altar. My son-in-law, though I'd never warmed to the term, directed pallbearers with quick hand motions, nodded firmly at the minister, even shook hands as if it were his stage. People deferred to him, their eyes following his lead, their respect offered like coins at his feet. A neighbor leaned toward me and whispered, "He really is the man of the family now, isn't he?" The words landed like a hammer. I swallowed hard, the bitterness rising faster than the hymn swelling from the choir. At the reception, paper cups of weak coffee and trays of casserole lined the tables. I reached for a folded obituary program left on a chair. My hands shook as I opened it. The print was simple, the words brief, her husband's name, the children's, even his parents listed, yet not a mention of me, not even as surviving father. Guests nearby murmured, puzzled, one of them whispering, "Strange, her father isn't in here." My chest tightened as though someone had struck me with a plank. Grief, sharp and public, carved into humiliation. Sitting in the corner, I stared at the words again, refusing to believe my daughter had approved this. The memory of our last conversations pressed in her tense voice, her insistence that I never step foot on the farm she loved so much. "Promise me, Dad, don't go there." I had laughed then, uneasy, chalking it up to stubbornness. But now suspicion crept in, slow and cold. Was it her voice, or his hand guiding hers as I folded the program? Something stiff caught under my fingers. Tucked inside was an envelope, sealed, the paper thick, an old friend. Gregory had brushed past me minutes before, slipping it in without a word, his eyes darting away. I held the envelope in my pocket, its weight far heavier than paper should allow. The service faded around me. Laughter at the other end of the hall, plates clinking, chairs scraping. But all I heard was the blood in my ears and the faint crinkle of the envelope each time I moved. My hand pressed against my jacket pocket, feeling the edge of the seal. Was this her secret? The answer lay inside. But not yet. The drive back from the funeral passed in a blur. Headlights cutting through the autumn dusk. Trees swaying like shadows of grief against the sky. The house felt emptier than usual when I stepped inside. Silence pressing down, as if Marla's absence had seeped into the walls. My jacket sagged with the weight of the envelope, each step reminding me it was there, waiting. I set it on the table and stared at it for a long while, almost afraid to open it. Why would Marla hide something from me? Why keep me away from the farm so fiercely? The questions burned, and yet the only sound was the tick of the old kitchen clock. I finally tore the seal with shaking hands. Inside, folded pages carried her familiar handwriting. Dad, if you're reading this, I'm gone. My chest constricted. She wrote about secrets she wished she could tell, about Clayton's control, about things she had signed under pressure. Do not trust him, the letter warned. Go to the farm. There are papers you need to see. They were never meant to reach you, but they belong to you. My breath came short, each line cutting deeper. It was Marla's voice, trembling across the distance of death. I pulled old boxes from my study closet, dust rising in the dim light. Deeds, wills, insurance forms. I remembered signing some of them years back after my wife died. Yet page after page, my name was gone. In its place, Clayton's neat signature sat as executor, owner, authority. It was as if I had been erased. Anger swelled hot in my chest, boiling over the grief. What had he done, and why had Marla let this stand, needing answers? I picked up the phone and dialed Gregory Shaw. My old friend. Greg, I asked, voice low. You remember the land I passed on to Marla years back, the farm? A pause stretched too long. He cleared his throat, then muttered something vague about not being able to talk. His tone was clipped, nervous, as though someone was listening. Then he hung up. The silence that followed was heavier than any funeral hymn. I sat at my desk with Marla's letter still trembling in my hand, staring at words that seemed to glow with warning. My fingers hovered over the phone, tempted to call Clayton and demand the truth. Instead, a whisper escaped. What did you hide from me, Marla? That was when I heard it, the low hum of an engine outside. I pulled back the curtain just enough to see headlights flicker against the blinds. Unmoving. Watching. The morning after the funeral, sleep refused to give me peace. I woke before the sun climbed past the mountains, the air inside the house heavy with silence. Marla's letter lay on the nightstand where I had left it, folded neatly, though the paper looked weary, as if her words carried weight enough to wrinkle it. My hand lingered on it, my thumb tracing the edge. It felt wrong to cling so tightly to a piece of paper, but it was all I had left of her voice. She had written not to trust Clayton, had urged me to remember the farm she swore I should never return to. The contradiction gnawed at me. Why warn me away, yet point me toward it in death? The ache in my chest deepened as the light crept in through the blinds. Every crack of dawn had always been a call to rise and work, but now it felt like a reminder that the world still moved even while my daughter lay buried. I shuffled to the kitchen, made myself coffee that tasted like burnt ash, and sat staring out the window. Thoughts of the farm would not leave me. She had tied me to that place again, as if her ghost had reached across the grave to press me toward the truth. I hated the guilt that crept in. The thought that maybe I hadn't known her at all during those last years. Memories fought their way into the silence. I could see Marla at 8 years old, the day I first took her to the farm. She had sprinted through the rows of corn, her laughter bursting across the fields like a bell I never wanted silenced. She had chased the barn cats, tumbled in the hayloft, and called the place our kingdom. Those days painted the land as sacred, a bond between father and daughter. But somewhere along the years, that joy faded. By the time she was grown, she flinched whenever the farm was mentioned. She would cut me off with sharp words. Don't go back there, Dad. Just promise me you won't. The shift had been sharp, unexplained, and I had swallowed my questions, thinking it better not to push. Now, her letter made that silence unbearable. Why had she forbidden me? What had Clayton done to twist her away from the very place that had once meant joy? The farm was no ordinary patch of earth. It was layered with history, laughter, and then, somehow, fear. That fear had lingered in her voice until the end. By mid-morning, I could no longer sit idle. I slipped the letter into my jacket and drove the old pickup toward the outskirts of Asheville. The autumn roads curved through thinning trees, each bend pulling me closer to the land I hadn't set foot on in decades. My hands clenched the wheel tighter the nearer I came. When the farmhouse roof peeked over the ridge, my heart jolted as though I were trespassing on sacred ground. I didn't drive all the way in. Instead, I pulled off to the roadside, engine humming low, eyes fixed on the land that once was mine in spirit, if not in law. That's when I saw Ellis Harmon. He was a neighbor, older now, his back bent more than I remembered, but his eyes quick to catch me lingering. He walked over slowly, boots scuffing the gravel, his face carrying unease. "You thinking of going back in there?" "Orville," he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, then admitted, "I've been thinking of it all night. Feels like Marla left me no choice." Ellis shifted his weight and looked toward the farm as though it might overhear him. His words came out clipped, rushed. "Clayton's been seen there. Late nights. More than once. Couple weeks before Marla passed. The world stilled around me. The trees, the road, even the sky seemed to hang on that name. Clayton, walking those grounds at night like he owned them." My jaw tightened, blood warming with anger. "Are you sure?" My voice cracked. Part demand, part plea. Ellis's eyes darted away. I shouldn't have said anything. Folks don't want to be caught in the middle. He backed a step. Best let it be. "Orville, nothing good comes from stirring up the past." But the warning only fanned the fire inside me. If Clayton had been sneaking around the farm, then Marla's letter was no riddle. It was a cry for me to see the truth. She hadn't been paranoid. She had known something. And now Ellis had confirmed it. I tried to press him, but Ellis raised a hand, his voice trembling. "Please, I got a family. I can't be dragged into this." With that, he turned and walked back, leaving me at the roadside with more questions than answers. The drive back was long and heavy. My fingers clenched the wheel so tight they ached. Every mile brought sharper clarity. Clayton wasn't just overstepping. He was moving in places he had no right to. Marla's silence, her sudden distance, her fear of me ever stepping foot back here, it all pointed to him. Rage stirred in me. Not the kind that burned out quick, but the kind that settled deep, feeding on betrayal. As the town's edge came into view, I noticed the car behind me. Dark, low, unmarked. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just another driver on the same stretch of road. But each turn I took, the sedan lingered, a few car lengths back, headlights steady, never passing, never falling away. I gripped Marla's letter inside my pocket, its edges dug into my palm, a reminder of her warning. My breath came slow and measured, though my heart raced. Whoever was behind that wheel wasn't just passing through. The truck rattled as I turned down the familiar streets toward home. The sedan stayed close, too close. Suspicion wasn't an abstract thought anymore. It had wheels, headlights, and it followed me through town. "If Clayton thinks I'll stay quiet," I muttered. "He's wrong. I didn't slow until I pulled into my driveway." Even then, the sedan lingered at the corner, idling, headlights flickering against the blinds of my home. The headlights cut through my curtains again that evening, sharp beams slicing across the living room wall. The same black sedan from earlier idled across the street. I sat in my armchair, pretending to read, though my eyes hadn't moved past the same line for half an hour. My heart thudded in my chest. Steady and strong age hadn't dulled the anger rising inside me. Whoever sat in that car wasn't here by accident. They thought parking there, engine humming low, would unsettle me. And truth be told, it did. My palms were damp, my mind racing. But beneath the fear was something harder: anger. They believed an old man like me would fold at the first sign of intimidation. They were wrong, I muttered to myself. They think I'll be scared into silence. Not now, not ever. The engine coughed once, then quieted. The street lay still under the orange glow of the streetlights. But I knew better than to believe it was over. That car was a shadow sent for me, and shadows always carry orders. As I stared out into the dark, a memory hit me. Sharp as broken glass, Marla's voice clear. Steady weeks before she passed. We'd been standing by her porch. The air was heavy with summer heat. She had grabbed my hand, something she hadn't done since she was a little girl, and said, "Dad, promise me, don't let anyone push you off what's yours." At the time, I thought she was talking about pride, about my stubbornness to keep working odd jobs even though retirement money was enough. But now, it echoed different, like she knew this fight was coming, like she was leaving me a warning wrapped in love. The grief that had worn me thin began to twist into resolve. The more I replayed her words, the stronger they became. Fear slipped back, replaced by a kind of steel I thought I'd lost years ago. Whatever Marla wanted to protect, I would not abandon. A car door opened outside. My muscles tensed. Slow footsteps echoed on the pavement, drawing nearer. Then came a knock, 3 firm raps against my door. I hesitated only a moment before standing. The letter was still in my pocket, its weight reminding me of the truth I hadn't fully uncovered. I opened the door. A tall man stood there, mid-40s, dressed sharp but casual pressed shirt, expensive shoes. He smiled without warmth. "Mr. Keating," he asked smoothly. I nodded. "Name's Dennis Riker," he said, extending a hand. I didn't take it. "I work with Clayton. Thought I'd stop by. Just to chat." "Chat." My voice came out gravelly. "Firm." He gave a little shrug. "We all grieve differently. Clayton, he's trying to do what's best for the family. For Marla's memory, sometimes. Old papers, old claims, can stir confusion. I'd hate to see that confusion cause trouble." There it was, politeness wrapped around a threat. My jaw tightened, but I met his eyes. "What kind of trouble are you talking about?" Dennis smiled again. Thinner this time. The kind you don't need at your age. Why not let the past rest? Let Clayton handle the estate. He's already been doing it. After all, anger flared hot, but I kept my voice even. Marla was my daughter. That land was my blood and sweat long before Clayton ever showed his face. You don't get to come here and tell me to forget it. The smile faltered for a second, replaced by something colder. Dennis leaned a little closer, lowering his voice. Marla trusted Clayton with everything. If you dig into things that were already settled, you might end up dragging her memory through the mud. Nobody wants that. The words pierced deep. For a second, I felt the sting of doubt, like maybe keeping quiet would protect what little dignity Marla had left in the public eye. But then the letter pressed against my ribs again, reminding me. Marla's own hand had written the warning. She wanted me to fight. I forced my face into a mask, feigning calm. "I hear what you're saying," I murmured. Dennis gave a satisfied nod, as though he believed he'd won. "Good. Peace is better than conflict. Remember that." He turned, heading back toward the black sedan. Just before climbing inside, he looked over his shoulder. "One more thing. The farm doesn't belong to you anymore. Stay away." The door slammed shut, and the car rolled off slowly, taillights glowing like coals in the night. I stood frozen in the doorway. Marla's letter clenched in my fist, its edges cutting into my palm. The farm, the place she had begged me not to visit, was the center of it all. Now they were bold enough to say it outright, "Stay away," which meant they were hiding something big. My fear had transformed into something different. The game was no longer about intimidation. It was about proof, about uncovering whatever they thought they could bury with her. As the sedan disappeared into the dark, I whispered into the empty night, "If they think I'll stay quiet, they've forgotten who raised Marla." That night, sleep never came. The farm called to me louder than ever. By dawn, I had made up my mind I would step onto that land, even if it killed me. The night stretched long, heavy with the weight of Dennis's warning. Sleep wouldn't come. The image of his smirk, his parting words about the farm, replayed again and again. By dawn, the decision had been carved deep in stone. Waiting any longer was a mistake. The truck's engine turned over with a reluctant groan, breaking the morning silence. Roads out of Asheville lay quiet, fog coiling low over the hills. Every passing mile brought the farm closer. The words of Marla's letter echoing, "Don't let anyone push you off what's yours." It wasn't just land anymore. It was the truth that had been hidden away. When the old fence line appeared, a knot tightened in the chest. Grass and weeds had swallowed the driveway, yet the tire tracks cutting through dew told a different story. Someone had been here, recently, stepping out. The sharp chill of morning air mixed with the faint smell of smoke cigarette butts scattered near the porch, still fresh enough that the paper hadn't crumbled. Every creak of the porch boards underfoot screamed of intrusion. The screen door, once always latched, now hung loose, and inside, chaos waited. Drawers pulled open, papers tossed about in heaps, yet the walls still held photographs. Marla's smile frozen in frames, her hand in his when she was little, the summer picnics, her graduation day. The looters hadn't touched those. For a moment, grief pressed down harder than suspicion. Still, the search pressed on. Footsteps traced old memories through dust, into the back rooms where shadows held more than silence. Something was wrong. Not just with the ransacked house, but with the silence that pressed in too heavy, too deliberate, as though the walls themselves remembered what had been taken. Outside again. The barn loomed, bigger than memory, darker than the dawn. Its doors were chained with a fresh lock, steel shining new against old wood. Marla's warning not to return, her strange fear of this place in her later years, flared sharp in the mind. Hands trembled as a crowbar bit into the chain's rusted side window frame. The metal shrieked under pressure before giving way. A shoulder forced its way through a gap barely wide enough, dust and mold clawing at the lungs. The beam of the flashlight cut through stale air, landing on the outline of another door within a door locked tight inside the barn itself. The heart hammered loud enough to drown the silence. Breath caught. Every step toward that door felt heavier. Marla's secret pressing in closer, whispering through time. The fingertips brushed the wood, tracing its edge. The lock gleamed like a sentinel, daring him to try. Marla. The whisper escaped into the dark. What on earth were you hiding here? The weight of the truth pressed against that locked door. And with it, the certainty that once opened, nothing would ever be the same again. The chain clattered under the weight of the crowbar, rusty links snapping one by one. Each strike sent a jolt through my arms. But it wasn't just the effort, it was the fear that my daughter's warning had been more than a daughter's stubbornness. Marla had told me, time and again, "Don't go there, Dad. Promise me." That promise broke the moment the padlock hit the dirt. The barn door groaned as I pushed it open, the hinges stiff with years of neglect. A stale gust of dust and mold pressed against my face, thick enough to sting the nose. The beam of my flashlight cut through darkness, revealing sagging beams, hay scattered across the floor, and broken furniture piled in corners. But the silence wasn't complete. Not here. In the dirt, clear footprints tracked across the floor. Near a workbench, a styrofoam cup rested on its side, coffee not yet turned fully cold. My chest tightened. Someone had been here recently, Clayton's men. maybe even Clayton himself. They weren't just sniffing around. They were leaving breadcrumbs, warnings that this place didn't belong to me anymore. I whispered into the shadows. They think they can erase me, but not yet. Every step deeper into the barn felt like a trespass into a memory Marla had locked away. I remembered her laughter here when she was a child, the way she used to climb the hay bales like stairs to the rafters. But that joy had soured somewhere along the line, her tone shifting from fond nostalgia to sharp orders, "Stay away. Dad, don't go back there." The beam of my light struck something odd, planks on the wall not nailed straight. I pressed them, and the wood shifted with a hollow creak. Behind it, a narrow compartment hid a set of folders stacked in uneven piles. Hands trembling. I pulled them free. The first page nearly stopped my breath. The deed to the farm. My name, once signed in black ink decades ago, scratched out. In its place, Clayton's signature. Clumsy. Done in at least 3 different handwriting styles as though he'd been practicing forgery. More papers followed, each one tampered with. My identity, my authority, all systematically erased. Shock gave way to a wave of outrage so strong my knees nearly buckled. Years of sacrifice, sweat, money, time poured into this land, and here it was, stolen in black and white, a fraud unfolding right in front of me. "This is what you did to her." "Clayton," I muttered, voice breaking. "You poisoned her trust, and now you try to bury me." I stuffed the papers into my coat, but my hand brushed against something else wedged at the bottom of the compartment. Wrapped in a faded cloth was a small, leather-bound book. The moment my thumb touched its cracked cover, my breath caught Marla's handwriting scrawled across the first page. The words blurred as my eyes filled. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means I wasn't strong enough to protect you. Clayton, he's been changing things, signing papers, pressuring me. I didn't know how to stop him without hurting you." Every line was a dagger, her pain captured in ink. She hadn't pushed me away out of coldness. She had carried the burden alone to keep me safe. Grief and vindication tangled in my chest. She'd tried to protect me, but it had killed her to do so. I closed the journal, clutching it tight. That's when the sound reached me. A car door slamming outside. Voices, low but sharp, carried through the thin walls of the barn. The crunch of boots on gravel followed, each step pulling closer. My heart raced as I stuffed the journal under my coat, tucking the fraudulent deeds beside it. If they found me here with these... The barn door creaked as shadows slid across the slivers of light. I pressed myself against the wall, whispering, "You won't bury this. Marla." Not again. The hinges groaned louder, echoing like thunder in the silence. As the door began to swing open, the barn door groaned as it swung open, the beam of my flashlight quivering across the old wooden boards. I had barely stuffed Marla's journal deep inside the lining of my coat before the sound of heavy boots scraped across the threshold. 2 men filled the doorway, broad-shouldered and grim-faced, their silhouettes blotting out the morning light. One of them stepped forward, his voice steady but laced with threat. "Mr. Keating, let's make this simple. Hand over what you just found. Those papers don't belong to you." The journal pressed cold against my chest. Hidden like a heartbeat, I refused to surrender. Fear shot through me, but it was tempered by anger. These men thought they could corner me like a frail old man with no fight left. My pulse pounded as I straightened, refusing to cower in my daughter's barn. They moved closer, one reaching for my arm. The grip was firm, calculated to remind me of my weakness. My voice, hoarse but steady, cut through the musty air. This was my daughter's home. Her blood runs through these walls. Don't tell me I have no right to be here. The man sneered. Your daughter trusted Clayton. You ought to do the same. I wrenched my arm free, glaring at him. If Marla trusted him so much, she wouldn't have left me warnings. She wouldn't have kept secrets he's desperate to bury. The words hung heavy. Their eyes flicked toward each other, uncertain. They hadn't expected defiance. I needed to think fast. The journal was safe, but the stack of loose deeds and yellowed bills of sale I had scooped into a folder moments earlier trembled in my other hand. I thrust it toward them with deliberate irritation, masking the truth in the gesture. Take it, then. If you think scraps of old woodwork bills will make Clayton king of the farm, be my guest. They grabbed the folder, rifling through the brittle papers. One gave a dry chuckle. This is what you're hiding, receipts and dust. Don't waste our time again, old man. They shoved past me, the barn's shadows swallowing their retreat. But before leaving, one leaned close, his breath acrid with smoke. Stay away from here, or you won't just lose paper. You'll lose the little dignity you've got left. When the sound of their truck finally faded, silence rushed in like a tidal wave. I sank onto a wooden crate, my legs trembling, hands still gripping the hidden journal inside my coat. Relief came sharp, followed by sorrow. Marla's neat handwriting peeked out from the leather cover when I dared to glance again. I flipped to a page marked with a folded corner. Her words cut through the dust and fear, Dad. If you're reading this, I couldn't protect everything, but I believe you can. The barn smelled of mold and betrayal, but in that moment it also held her trust. I whispered to the air, to her memory. They won't bury your truth. Not while I breathe. With careful steps, I left the barn. The journal pressed close beneath my coat. The morning sun burned through the tree line, but its warmth couldn't erase the figure that stood waiting at a distance. Clayton. He leaned against the shadow of a pine, arms crossed, watching me. Our eyes met across the gravel yard. He didn't move closer, didn't shout, didn't send his men again. He just smiled, a knowing, poisonous smirk that told me he understood exactly what I had found. My breath caught in my throat, but I refused to look away. If it was a battle he wanted, he'd just declared it without a word. That smirk would follow me home, sharper than any threat his men had spoken. The real fight had just begun. The letter from Clayton had been sitting on the kitchen table all day, its tone polite but the intent unmistakable. It wasn't an invitation. It was a demand, a family discussion. He called it about Marla's estate. My gut told me it was a trap, but traps only work when you're afraid to walk into them. I slid Marla's journal beneath my coat, close enough to feel its weight against my chest, and told myself that whatever they thought they could do to me tonight, they weren't ready for the truth she left behind. The drive out to the farmhouse stretched long and quiet. Bare trees clawed at the darkening sky, and the gravel hummed beneath the tires like a warning drumbeat. Every word Marla had written in that leather-bound book replayed in my mind her doubts, her fears, her trust that I'd uncover the truth when the time came. That time was now. The moment I stepped inside the farmhouse, the air grew thick with hostility. Clayton sat at the head of the table, his posture stiff, smug as a king on a cheap throne. Ellen, Marla's cousin, was perched uncomfortably to his right, her lips pressed tight, and two lawyers with glossy briefcases sat opposite me. They'd arranged it like a courtroom, me on one side, them aligned neatly against me. Even the way the chairs were placed spoke of control. "Thank you for coming, Orville," Clayton said, his voice dripping with forced civility. "This is long overdue." I said nothing, just looked around the room, memorizing faces, noting the way Ellen couldn't quite meet my eyes, the way the lawyers sat with pens already poised like vultures ready to record my downfall. Clayton wasted no time. He rose, folded his hands behind his back, and with a sigh meant to sound patient, began his attack. "We're all worried about you," he said, turning to the lawyers as if I weren't even there. Grief does strange things to a man of his age. Orville's been imagining conspiracies, seeing ghosts in old barns. It's dishonoring Marla's memory. The words struck hot, but I kept my face steady. He pulled out a folder, sliding papers across the table with a flourish. Here, he continued. These are the estate documents, proof that Marla entrusted everything to me. Her farm, her assets, all secured for the future of our children. It's what she wanted. The lawyers leaned forward, nodding, while Ellen bit her lip, uneasy. I stared at the pages, recognizing the forgeries. My name erased like I had never existed in my own daughter's life. My humiliation boiled into anger. I pushed back my chair, the scrape cutting sharp through the silence, and stood, slowly, deliberately. I laid Marla's journal and the altered papers side by side on the table. You want to talk about memory, Clayton? My voice came steady, carrying the weight of decades. Then let's hear hers. I opened the journal to the pages I'd marked and read aloud Marla's words. Her handwriting trembled on the page, but her meaning was iron, her fear of Clayton's manipulations, her regret at staying silent, her plea that I one day find strength to uncover what she could not say aloud. The room shifted like the ground had given way. Ellen's eyes widened, darting between me and Clayton. One of the lawyers adjusted his glasses, face paling as he recognized the unmistakable authenticity of Marla's hand. Clayton's confidence faltered, but only for a moment. Then his mask slipped. His face flushed red, and with a roar he slammed his fist on the table. The glasses rattled, and Ellen jumped. You'll regret crossing me, old man. He spat, his voice stripped of all civility. You think that book makes you strong? It makes you a fool. I didn't flinch. My fingers tightened around Marla's journal, the truth pulsing through it like blood. For the first time, I felt her beside me, her trust, her voice carried in mine. You buried her once, I said, my tone like stone, but you won't bury her truth. The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. Clayton glared at me, his lips curled in that smirk I'd come to hate. In that moment, I knew the battle lines had been drawn. There was no more hiding, no more quiet grief. This was war. The house felt colder than usual that night, though the thermostat hadn't moved an inch. I walked through the front door after leaving the farmhouse and let the silence swallow me whole. The echoes of Clayton's voice still rang in my ears, his threats, his smirk, the way he leaned across that table like he owned not only Marla's memory, but every inch of my life that had been tied to her. Sitting down in my chair, exhaustion pressed down like a heavy quilt. I stared at the framed photos on the mantel, Marla at 5 years old with pigtails, Marla as a teenager holding her first dog, Marla at her wedding. Each face smiled at me from behind glass, but I couldn't keep from seeing Clayton lurking behind those smiles, rewriting everything to suit himself. The journal sat on my lap, its worn leather edges rough against my palms. I traced the cover with my thumb, as if touching it might somehow bring Marla back. For the first time in years, my own home felt less like a refuge and more like a cell where every memory rattled its chains. I picked up the phone. First, I called Ellen. No answer. I tried again. Finally, she picked up, her voice short and stiff. Ellen, it's me, I said, careful to keep my tone even. I just wanted to talk about what happened tonight. There was a pause, then a sigh heavy enough to cut through the line. Uncle Orville, maybe it's best if you let things rest. People are saying, well, they think you're imagining things. Clayton says you're not well, that grief's made you confused. Her words sliced me more than Clayton's insults ever could. Confused, my voice cracked. Ellen, I've got Marla's words, in her own hand, warning me about him. Don't you see what's happening? But she'd already gone quiet. I have to go, she whispered, and the line went dead. I tried one more relative, someone I'd thought would stand by me no matter what. The response was the same hesitation, avoidance, the weight of Clayton's shadow pressing them back into silence. By the time I put the phone down, the truth landed hard. I wasn't just fighting Clayton. I was fighting the way he was twisting everyone else's view of me, turning me into the villain of my own story. It was near midnight when the knock came. I jolted upright, half expecting Clayton himself to be standing outside. Instead, when I opened the door, there was Gregory Shaw, his shoulders slumped, as if carrying a burden he'd kept hidden for years. "I know it's late," Gregory said, voice low, "but I couldn't leave you to face this alone." We sat at the kitchen table, the journal between us like a living presence. Gregory's hands shook as he folded them. "Orville, I should have told you sooner. Years back, I saw Clayton with papers that didn't sit right. Deeds, signatures. Your name wasn't where it should have been. I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere, but Marla, she came to me once, asking questions. I think she suspected too." My heart clenched. "And you didn't say anything?" Gregory's eyes filled with guilt. "I was a coward. I thought if I kept quiet, it would all blow over. But now she's gone, and I can't carry this silence any longer." For the first time in days, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, exactly, but the faintest flicker of hope. Gregory was admitting what I'd long suspected, that Clayton's lies had roots stretching back years. "I can't undo my silence," Gregory said, voice breaking, "but I can give you something that might help." He slid a piece of paper across the table with a name written in firm block letters, Linda Green. "She's a lawyer," he explained. "Years ago, she questioned some of Clayton's filings. Nobody listened, and she nearly lost her practice standing up to him. If anyone can help you prove what's real, it's her." I stared at the name until it blurred. The weight of it felt heavier than the journal itself. A lifeline, maybe. A chance to claw back what was stolen. Gregory reached across the table, resting his hand on mine. "Don't wait too long. Orville, Clayton's already moving fast." After he left, the house was quiet again, but not empty this time. I looked at Marla's journal, then at the name written on that paper. The ache of betrayal still lingered, but alongside it came something else: resolve, raw and unshakable. Clayton had convinced most of the family that I was unstable, a senile old man chasing ghosts. But I knew the truth, and now I had someone else who believed, even if only partly. I whispered into the silence, as though Marla could hear me. "We'll fight him. Sweetheart, you and me, we're not done yet." Sleep never came that night. My mind kept circling around Gregory's words, the weight of Marla's journal, and the gnawing thought that time was slipping through my fingers. By dawn, I gave up pretending to rest. The house was cold, the kind of cold that seeped in not from weather but from absence. No daughter's laughter, no warmth of family, just me, my thoughts, and the fragile hope that someone out there might finally believe me. Marla's journal lay open on the kitchen table. My fingers traced her handwriting, shaky toward the end, but still hers. One line stopped me cold, "Dad. If you ever go back to the farm, remember it was never just ours anymore." I read it 3 times, the words cutting deeper each pass. Gregory had sent me toward Linda Green, a woman I'd never met but who apparently had once stood up to Clayton. I tucked the journal inside my coat. The decision was made. The bus into Asheville rattled like old bones. I sat near the back, my reflection flickering against the scratched window. Outside, the rolling hills gave way to the steel and glass of the city, an unforgiving reminder of how far away my life had drifted. Commuters climbed aboard in pressed suits, clutching lattes and glowing phones, eyes avoiding mine. I felt out of place, like a relic someone had forgotten to throw away. Doubt gnawed at me. What if Linda sends me out the door like the rest? What if she thinks I'm chasing ghosts? The legal district rose before me, tall, clean towers where the air buzzed with people who had places to be and money to make. My legs felt heavier with every step as I searched for the brass plaque that read Linda Green, attorney at law. When I finally pushed open her office door, the smell of paper and polish hit me first, sharp and sterile. She stood to greet me mid-50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes, not the type to waste a word or a second. "Mr. Keating," she said, as though she already knew me. I nodded, my throat dry. I told her everything, Marla's warnings, the missing papers, the barn, Clayton's men, even Dennis Riker's threats. She didn't interrupt once, just leaned back, hands folded, gaze locked on me. When I finished, she opened a drawer and slid a folder across the desk. "I warned your daughter years ago. She wouldn't listen. Said she didn't want you burdened with it." Inside were photocopies of deeds and transfer forms, some dating back nearly a decade. My name, once there, scratched out, replaced by Clayton's in handwriting that wasn't mine. The paper blurred as I stared, shock pounding like blood in my ears. Marla had known. She had carried this weight alone. Linda's voice cut through. "Clayton isn't the only one. He had help money men. Maybe even people inside county records. If you push this, you're not just exposing him. You're dragging bigger shadows into the light." Her words should have chilled me, but something hardened inside instead. For the first time, there was proof, not whispers, not suspicions, proof. She reached into another file and pulled out a sealed envelope, heavy as stone. "Keep this safe. Copies, witness statements, things that were ignored when I raised alarms years ago. You'll need it, but it may also paint a target on your back." I slipped it inside my coat. Next to Marla's journal, my chest tightened. Not from fear this time, but from the weight of resolve. "I've already lived with ghosts," I told her quietly. "I won't let them bury her truth." When I left her office, the city noise hit me like a wave horns. Footsteps, chatter, but underneath it all, something else. The hum of an engine behind me. A dark car idled across the street, its windows tinted, the driver invisible. It eased forward when I stepped onto the sidewalk. Slow, patient. I gripped the envelope tighter against my chest. For the first time since Marla's funeral, I felt the line sharpen between fear and purpose. This wasn't just about my daughter anymore. It was about me, too. About what kind of man I'd be in the years I had left. And as the car followed, inch for inch, I whispered to myself, "If they think I'll go quiet, they don't know me at all." The evening air felt thicker than usual as I made my way home. Clutching the evidence Linda Green had placed in my hands, I had taken a different route back, weaving through unfamiliar side streets, doubling back at one point just to see if that car was still behind me. I couldn't tell for sure, but something about the way the shadows stretched along the pavement made me feel hunted. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I did something I rarely ever did in this quiet town. I locked every door, bolted the windows, and even checked the back porch twice. My house, once a place of refuge, now felt like a target. The envelope of documents never left my side until I slid it into Marla's old music box, a relic she once used to play lullabies when she was a little girl. Hiding it there felt like placing it under her protection. The phone rang not long after. I picked it up, only to be met with silence, no breathing, no background noise, just dead air. Then a click. My pulse quickened. Linda's warning replayed in my head. "If you go forward, you'll be walking into a storm." I thought about calling Gregory, but the idea of dragging him into the crosshairs didn't sit right. He'd already carried his own guilt. This was mine to shoulder. Later that night, while sitting in my chair with the journal open on my lap, a sound cut through the silence, the crunch of gravel under slow, deliberate footsteps. My body went rigid, peering through the blinds. I saw two men at my fence line, shadows stretching long across the yard. They weren't neighbors out for a stroll. They lingered, whispering, then turned toward my shed, The scratching of metal on wood followed, and when they left, I could see it clearly under the moonlight words carved into the wood grain. Drop it, old man. The sight jolted me harder than a punch. My chest tightened with both fear and anger. I nearly picked up the phone to call the sheriff. But then the thought hit me, what if the local authorities were already bought? If Clayton had investors and officials on his side? Could I really trust anyone? I returned to the table, spreading Linda's documents out under the lamplight. These weren't just about family betrayal anymore. They were deeds, transfers, and agreements that tied Clayton's name to outside interests with deep pockets. Land, power, money. It wasn't just personal. It was systemic. Sleep never came. When I finally stretched out on the bed, another sound jolted me upright. This time it wasn't footsteps, it was the soft scrape of paper sliding under my front door. I patted across the floor cautiously, heart hammering. An envelope lay there, stark against the wood. Inside, a single line in block letters read, "This is your final warning." I sat back down, the letter trembling in my hand, before slipping it between the pages of Marla's journal. Their threats no longer felt like shadows. They were real, carved into wood, written on paper, whispered in the night. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. They thought fear would silence me. They had no idea. I'd lived through storms far greater than this one. And this time, I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for my daughter's voice. A voice they thought they had buried. Dawn broke cold and gray, as though the sky itself shared the weight pressing on my shoulders. Sleep hadn't come. Only a restless drifting between Marla's words in her journal and the threatening notes slipped under my door the night before. I sat at the kitchen table, Linda's documents spread before me, each page heavy with proof of deception. My pen scratched across one last page in my old leather-bound journal, this one addressed to my late wife. "I'll protect what we built," I wrote, closing the book with a trembling hand. The envelope of evidence lay beside me, sealed tight. I tucked it into my coat along with Marla's locket and slipped the small tape recorder into my pocket. It had captured more than enough: the veiled threats, the intimidation, even Clayton's associates speaking my daughter's name with a smirk. They thought an old man would fold. They forgot I'd lived through harder storms. The courthouse was already humming when I arrived. The polished wooden doors opened into a room filled with low voices, the shuffling of papers, the anticipation of judgment. Clayton and Ellen were there, dressed sharp, whispering to their lawyers with smug confidence. Their faces carried the ease of people who believed victory was already in their hands. They looked at me as though I were nothing but a tired relic clinging to shadows. Clayton even smirked, that same twisted grin I'd seen at the farm. Ellen couldn't meet my eyes, her jaw tight with rehearsed indignation. When my turn came, I stood slowly, steadying my legs, and placed the envelope on the table before the judge. I spoke calmly, not in anger, but with clarity that cut deeper than rage ever could. I laid out the fraudulent contracts Linda had unearthed, the altered signatures, the land deeds that bore marks of forgery. Then, with a firm hand, I pressed play on the recorder. The courtroom filled with the sound of Dennis Riker's voice, dripping with menace. "Drop it, old man. The farm doesn't belong to you anymore." Gasps rippled through the room. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably, their polished faces cracking. And when Gregory Shaw took the stand, his voice steady though his hands shook, he confirmed under oath what he had witnessed years ago: Clayton manipulating Marla, coercing her into silence, weaving a fraud so deep even the closest family couldn't see it. In that moment, the tide turned. Clayton's mask shattered before everyone. His voice rose, raw with fury. "This is a damn setup. He's senile. He's been plotting against us for years." His fists slammed the table so hard the judge called for order. Ellen tried to salvage something, anything, but the documents with her own signature betrayed her. Every lie unraveled under the weight of truth. The judge's gavel cracked through the air, silencing the chaos. He declared their claims void, stripped them of any legal hold over the estate, and announced that charges of fraud and coercion would be pursued. My body sagged with relief I hadn't dared let myself feel until that moment. I slipped Marla's locket from my pocket and held it tight, whispering so softly no one else could hear justice. "Sweetheart." At last, outside the courthouse, Ellen confronted me, eyes blazing with venom. "You've ruined us, you bitter old man," I met her glare, my voice cold as winter. "No, Ellen, you ruined yourself the moment you chose greed over blood." She froze, unable to respond, and for once, the silence between us spoke louder than her rage. Clayton stormed past, his face twisted, shoulders hunched like a predator caught in his own trap. Then a smaller hand tugged at my sleeve. My grandson, his face pale but his eyes steady, whispered up to me, "Grandpa, I'll never forget what you did today." I knelt, resting a hand on his shoulder. For all the bitterness and betrayal that filled the air, that single moment carved a light through the darkness. That night, sitting back in my quiet house, I let myself reflect. The estate, the land, the legacy, it had nearly been stolen, twisted into a weapon of greed. But I had taken steps no one yet knew. The night before court, I had rewritten my will. Not 1 cent, not 1 acre, would go to Ellen or Clayton. Instead, I left it all in trust for my grandson, protected, locked tight until he was old enough to understand what had been fought for. He would inherit not just soil and wood, but the weight of sacrifice, the truth of betrayal, and the lesson that family honor is worth more than wealth. "Wealth means nothing if it rots the soul," I murmured into the silence. My daughter chose betrayal. My grandson must learn honor. Let him remember this fight, so he never repeats their mistakes. I closed Marla's journal, slid it into the drawer beside me, and turned off the lamp. For the first time in months, the heaviness lifted. I was old, yes, worn by years, bent by grief. But tonight, I slept as a man who had reclaimed his dignity.